What's up everybody, Unrested here, and today I'm switching it up just a little bit. I'm going to fit in a JFAQ real quick due to the fact that this week is a short week. I can't work every single day because on Wednesday I leave for Kohama, which is a small little island off the coast of Okinawa. Also, there's going to be a few changes. I had a friend here who is actually a fan and a watcher of the videos that I make. Helped me out with some images. Number one, he did an awesome intro. Thanks, Richard, for the intro to the new Osoroshi Saturday, which will be featured on the next Osoroshi video. It's not the one that you just saw. And he also gave me two little pics that I can put up for J-News and JFAQ. I didn't get a chance to put those up, and I also didn't get a chance to answer questions on this JFAQ that I posted. So I thought, without further ado, let me begin that. Eddie starts us off with, I've recently discovered your videos and I am trying to catch up with all the JFAQs, but I'd like to ask you if you could elaborate on how Japanese people view dyeing their hair. Repeat, I've done that one before. Dimitri says, I know Japan has a significant lower crime rate than most other countries, but a friend who was doing studies in Japan said that despite Japan's low crime rate, it's estimated that a staggering rape exists. Rape in this instance is including penetration, molestation, and fondling. Rape culture is a buzz phrase you hear a lot when dealing with gender equality. Would you say that Japan has a relatively large rape culture? From what I've heard, there's a lot of groping problems as far as like chikan or hentai, which means pervert. Chikan is the common one that you hear here in Osaka because they have a saying called chikana-kan, which means like stop you pervert, and that is a problem on trains as far as women being molested on trains. Not so much as it was in the past anymore. I mean, it's becoming less and less common, and we also actually have women-only trains too that allow them to get away from anything that they would feel as a threat. Nonetheless, I mean, it still does exist. It's not a problem that's been totally erased from Japanese society. As far as actual rape involving penetration, I had heard from professor statistics from a college in Tokyo that actually penetration type rape is actually very low in Japan due to the fact that a lot of pornography in manga is on the market and can be readily accessible to just about anyone, including anyone who can shop at a konbini. So I had heard that was actually quite low. You know, at the same time, I've never done any kind of study or researched or, you know, followed this up in any kind of college report, so I'm not any kind of expert. That's my 2 cents on it, though. Allison says, how difficult is it to switch from an American bank account to a Japanese one? Would it be better to take the money out and close your American account before leaving? Yeah, there's no way you're going to try and move your money every single time from an American account to a Japanese account. The exchange rate could be awful. You don't know what's going to happen, if it's going to go up or down. And on top of that, the transfer fees are just outrageous from either country. So you'd be losing so much money, it wouldn't be worth it. All right, next we has John here. He says, how are the insects like there, like arachnids? You know, I've heard of some kind of Japanese spider that's really large. I actually got to see one of these spiders one time. I think it was something called like the Japanese wolf spider or something like that, and it really wasn't that intimidating. One thing I do know that is pretty intimidating here is the Japanese wasp. Apparently, its bite has a toxic chemical in it which will actually literally erode your skin. I'm not saying like huge chunks of your skin are going to fall off, but around the bite area the skin will erode. So that's something to look out for. Adrian says, hey Scott, thanks for all the great videos. I know you mentioned before that placement in Japan as far as ALT jobs are basically up to the company, but I was curious if you knew any specifics, like if say you were to apply to a company office in Sapporo as opposed to Osaka. Okay, yeah, you're still going to be placed within like the prefecture. I'm not saying you would apply in Osaka and be put in Sapporo. That wouldn't make any sense. You're going to be, you know, at least within the same prefecture as the home office in which you applied. Now, as for JET, who you would apply to in America or any other Western English-speaking country, they're going to put you anywhere. It doesn't matter where their HQ is. Sonia says, sorry for my English, it's not my first language. Don't worry. Hey, Scott, if you didn't meet your wife and had gotten married, do you think you would have had a chance to be an illustrator in Japan, since you're not a native speaker, as you said before, and or do you think you'd still be in Japan today as teaching is not your thing, or if you would be sick of being a teacher and would have left? That's a good question. I think I still would be here. I would probably still be crunching the time away with teaching. I mean, being here is even more important than my job, I'd say. For me, it's the love of this country that waking up every day and saying I live in Japan feels great. I like most of the attitudes in this country. I agree with a lot of the politics and even some of the traditional beliefs I really enjoy here. I don't think I could ever really go back to America. At this point, I think that would be a reverse culture shock for me. Let's see, Dimitri says, how are sales tax handled when you, for example, buy a bag of chips or a Blue Wave from a store? Is it like America where the tax is a certain percentage based on the area? For example, the sales tax in my state is 6% on the dollar. So if something costs $2, from what I know, it should be the same in almost every prefecture. I haven't seen any prefecture have significantly higher taxes. I know also in America different things are taxed in different ways. Like I think like something like sometimes in Florida I remember we wouldn't have tax on clothes like when there was like back to school sales, but then like sometimes in Pennsylvania I remember there wasn't tax on food at some grocery stores. There's nothing like that here in Japan. If anything's taxed, it's taxed the same everywhere. Same goes for alcohol and cigarettes too. Ernesto says, just to go further into my studies, can you give me some examples or some references for Kansai dialect? Wakara-hen, Shinjirara-hen, Akan, Okini, Maido. There you go. Study those. Patrick. Scott, could you explain this to me? I've been to many weddings in Japan and I can never understand why during the wedding reception party, the parents sit in the back of the party furthest away from the bride and groom. It seems to me that the wedding parties are more geared towards friends and co-workers. Is there a reason for this? I always end up feeling depressed for the bride's father. God, I never noticed that. Even at my own wedding, they seem to sit pretty close. I don't know. That's a good question. I've never really noticed that. My friend's wedding too, they didn't sit really far away. Maybe it's just been the weddings you've been at, because my own personal experience, I haven't really had this happen much. Everybody sat about equal distance, but the room was more circular shape. So who's to say? I don't know. Unfortunately, I don't have any kind of expert opinion on that. Arno says, man, I heard from somewhere, possibly from you or another JFAQ, that it's common for Japanese people to be very loyal to the companies they work for and to generally stick to the same company in their whole career. Why is that? Would it be frowned upon if you had a few companies listed on your resume with a time span of 5 to 6 years? Yeah, here in Japan, that's not so bad that if you're switching companies, but the minimum you'd want to show that you've been at one company is 2 years. If you have pretty much a history of leaving companies after only a couple of months, that would look super bad on a resume here in Japan. Why do people stay so loyal? It's usually due to the fact that the companies used to, that's not so common anymore, they used to stay really loyal to the employees. They would give them lifetime employment. They'd actually steadily get a raise every single year until the day that they pretty much quit and or retired, I should say. And those raises would eventually lead to them getting a pretty significant income by the time they were, say, 50 or 60, so that it would be very easy for them to retire. Mind you, they'd have to work their way up just like anyone else, but the fact that those companies gave them such loyalty made them in return want to give such loyalty. That's not so common anymore. That's becoming less and less common. Dimitri says, do you know any popular conspiracy theories in Japan that are interesting that you'd like to share? Nah, not so much. I've been asked this one before too, and I really don't have anything. Devin says, what is up, Unrested? Question today is about a beauty that is in the shakuhachi. I'm wondering if... question today is about the beauty that is the shakuhachi. I'm wondering if this instrument is still widely used, or is it slowly over time fading into irrelevance? Yeah, the instrument he's talking about is one that has become more of a senpai, kohai type situation where an apprentice would be taught by a master in order to learn how to play this. And unfortunately, like many of the other traditions here in Japan, for example, sword making or even things like flower arrangement, they're becoming less and less popular with this generation. Zoe said, I saw this question on your comments from the last Facebook JFAQ and I now want to know the answer. The question was, have you seen The Wolverine? No, I haven't seen that movie, The Wolverine, yet. It touches on Japanese culture, chopsticks, yakuza, etc. How do the Japanese feel about this? You know what? I'll come back to that question once I've seen the movie, but that is a good question. I do like hearing what Japanese people think when America tries to give their spin. For example, Kill Bill and Lucy Liu's atrocious, super bad Japanese that she tries to speak. They usually just laugh about it. I mean, it's like, you know, watch Sukiyaki Western and listen to those people speak English. That's how bad she sounds in Japanese. Andrew says, a follow-up to my question about hipsters. What's a cool style going around Japan recently that looks cool in your opinion? Let's see. God, I don't know if they like. Do they have exact names for it? I don't know. There's like all different types of styles. Recently, there was one style. It actually looked pretty cool. It sounds really weird, but the dress or uniform a waiter would wear here in Japan includes obviously a very long apron, but the apron only starts at hips and goes below. Well, that's actually become almost like kind of like these baggy pants for guys to wear that are like really these gothic industrial half server aprons, half pants that are connected. And those look really cool. I don't think I could rock them at this point, being 34 years old, but they look pretty badass, and the people who do rock them do well. All right, Jack says, oh, Jock, he said his name is. He's finally given me a pronunciation key. I've got a few questions for you, Unrested, if you don't mind. Okay, Jock's questions. In Japan, there are these Uyoku Dantai. If you guys don't know who that is, it's like a right-wing violence group that ride around in black vans in big cities and shout out pro-Japanese propaganda. This is true. I see them here on Midasuji Street in Osaka. From what I've heard and researched, it contains lots of hate towards Korean and Chinese. It tends to be just Chinese and Koreans. Yeah, definitely, especially right now with the war over the islands. Well, there's no war, but the fight over the islands. However, some of these organizations don't like any kind of foreigner in Japan. This is true. Number one, my question, as a white cracker, if I was to go up to them and talk to them politely and curiously about their ideals, assuming I was good at Japanese, do you think they would be up to it, or would they yell at me? I think they'd actually be up to it. I actually had a friend in Okinawa who was military, and he had an Uyoku friend, and they always hung out together, and he said, like, do you know what my job is? I'm the guy who drives the van around. And he said, oh, really? I really don't care too much. I mean, and they were just like best friends. He hung out with them all the time, and he was as white could be. Number two, have you ever had a bad experience with these groups before? I've never had a bad experience with Uyoku in particular, surprisingly. I've actually been close to the Korean embassy, though, when they've started to try and park their cars around, and I've seen Koreans have trouble with them. Number three, have Japanese people ever come up to you, or privately or publicly, and wanted to politely discuss any kind of America versus Japan topic? For example, the A-bombings, military servicemen in Okinawa committing crimes, the debate in whaling. I doubt they typically would, since Japanese people are typically very friendly. Yeah, you know, even ones I've been friends with for a long time rarely ever bring this up. Number one, the A-bombings, the atomic bombs, are pretty much considered ancient history here in Japan. And it's kind of a your father, my father's type fight. They actually look back on it and think, well, that wasn't us fighting about it. That was your great-great-grandfather and my great-great-grandfather, so why are we worried about it? Most kids today, if I even try to talk to anybody about that, they'd just be like, well, who cares? You know, that's so long ago. As far as Okinawa, most of that Okinawa hate tends to just deal with Okinawans. You'd be surprised there's kind of a divide between Okinawan Japanese and Japanese on the main island. They've kind of always had a hate-love relationship with each other. It's confusing to say the least, let's put it that way. I could go into a whole JFAQ on it. And whaling. My big thing is I'm actually with the Japanese on their whaling rights and what they do with whaling, because I've actually researched it quite a bit. And I think anyone who actually puts a good amount of time to research into the fact that Japanese whale for specific reasons and they don't go crazy with it, and that there's other white countries that go whaling too but don't get bothered by Australia because they fight back. I think if people actually researched that a little bit and learned a little bit more about it, they would take the Japanese side too. So I myself never run into any arguments with that because I actually take the Japanese side. Kayla says, oh, Kaylee, I'm sorry, she has a pronunciation key. That's great. You guys, if you want to put pronunciation keys for your name here, that's awesome. I was thinking about how we in the West read from right to left, and I was wondering about the effect that Western customs have on reading in Japan. I used to think that people read from top to bottom and left to right. Are books starting to read from left to right, and are people starting to write left to right? No, everything is still the way it's always been in Japan, from right to left, and even if you get their version of the Kindle, the Kobo, it reads the same way. It'll actually even flip the pages like this. One thing I did see, though, that did have to be changed, and this was actually due to necessity, is that when mangas are translated, they have to be flipped because they run into problems with stuff being printed backwards. So they've had to actually like flip the images and then do them left to right, which, I mean, must be really annoying to have to constantly do that. I don't think many Americans would really mind too much if they had to read right to left. I mean, at the very first, maybe you'd be a little bit confused, but I don't think it would get you through the whole book. Let's see, Miranda is next. I know there are different dialects in Japan, but how big are the differences in them? They're not so big. They're mostly suffixes, and there's like one or two, more than one or two, but there's like a few handheld words that people switch out, like totemo becomes mecha, and nagara in Okinawa. Jeremy says, in Japan, is it more common for people to binge drink like crazy when they turn 20 because alcohol is so new to them, or do kids gradually learn from their family about alcohol? I would say, in general, kids in Japan don't go as crazy as most Westerners when they get to the age of drinking. Although the age of legal drinking in Japan is 20, we have alcohol and vending machines here, and nobody watches you to make sure there's no scanning of ID. If a kid really wants to get into alcohol before that, they can. But for the most part, kids who want to succeed in high school, or any school for that matter, need to study their ass off, and if they drink, it's just obviously not going to happen. Tammy says, what is a Japan apologist? Oh, I had mentioned this in an earlier video. A Japan apologist is somebody who apologizes or makes an excuse for everything Japan does, good or bad. For example, what's something that I don't agree with Japan? Okay, for example, comfort women. Hashimoto said that comfort women were needed during World War II. Well, that's bullshit. The guy's just an asshole. And that's completely sexist and horrible thing to say towards any woman anywhere. But a Japan apologist would be like, well, you know, for the time, that was right, and Japan was the right way to do that, and, you know, like, it's bullshit, okay? Japan made mistakes. America made some fucking mistakes, too, during the war. In the war, everybody makes mistakes. It doesn't make anybody else's right. James says, questions for a friend from Florida. If you remember, seeing as you're from Florida mostly, how did you react when your first winter experience in Japan? What type of clothing did you wear? Oh, that's a good question. I was thinking about that too before I came here. Osaka is not so bad. I'd say during January, February, it does get pretty darn frosty, but it's not like bad enough where you get major snowfall. You will maybe see some flurries, but that's about it. I would compare the cold to about North Carolina in America. I was fine with a navy pea coat. That's all I came here with for a heavy jacket, and I was fine. So if you think about how thick and heavy a navy pea coat is, you'll be fine. Emiliano says, how do you come up with how to style your hair? Sorry for the creepy unrelated question. I think your hairstyle is awesome. Not creepy or weird at all. That's a fine question and it's flattering. How do I come up with my hairstyles? Honestly, it's Japan that helps me come up with any hairstyle that I make. You know, there's always somebody out there who has a way cooler fucking hairstyle than me, and I pretty much copy him. I'm not gonna lie and say, well, I'm this unique artistic guy who invents my own haircuts. Pretty much, I mean, a lot of the haircuts that people do here in Japan are on the cutting edge. People who are actually cosmetologists keep up with all kinds of, you know, world trades and different international artistic types for cosmetologists. And so they're going to rock the newest haircut and make it look good, and I'm going to copy them. I'm not going to lie. Let's see what's next. Matthew says, hey Scott, I hope this question is okay, but what type of college degree do you have? I have a Master's of Art. I mean, do you have a bachelor's or a master's? I have a bachelor's of art and I have a master's of art. Michael says, top 5 Japanese YouTubers ever and why? Top 5 in my personal opinion that I will always respect. Hiko Simon, obviously, because the man is very intelligent, and he's helped me in the past with stuff, and he's got tons of valuable information, and he's very balanced on everything he says. And the guy can keep cool like a cucumber. I don't know how he keeps it intact like that. I wish I had the self-control he did. Obviously, Victor, the guy, has tons of knowledge. I mean, he gave me my first start here on YouTube pretty much by giving me a shout out and letting me do a video on his channel that got me tons of subs, so I'll always owe him. Tino, who is actually not as well known. He is the Mexican samurai. I've done a few collab videos with him. He has lived in Japan much longer than I have, has a lot more information on how to survive here, has a lot more super awesome wisdom stories about life in general. The guy, he's really, he's really in touch with building up wisdom from life experiences, and I think a lot can be learned from people like that. You should always look up to people who have more wisdom from life than you yourself, and you should listen very carefully to what they have to say. Two more. Let's see. These days, it seems like there's a lot of flaky stuff out there as far as people making a couple videos when they come here for college and then deleting everything. From my past, I used to really like Betamax DC. He's a great guy. He's a comedic genius, if nothing else, and he was really creative. I wish he still made videos. Let's see, last one, number 5, maybe Sam, Tokyo Sam. Him and I go way back. We've hung out, talked a lot. A lot of people give him a lot of shit, but the guy's a fun guy to hang out with, and he's a true friend, loyal guy. So I respect him for that manner, and that he really, truly, and utterly speaks his mind about what he thinks about Japan, even though some people get pissed off about that. Alright, Linda is next. When someone is moving from Kanto to Kansai, will the person speak automatically Kansai Ben? Okay, so you're saying if they were born in Kanto and they moved to Kansai, they would probably speak Kanto Ben, they wouldn't speak Kansai Ben. Obviously vice versa is usually true too, but most times Kansai people can speak Kanto Ben, but most times Kanto people can't speak Kansai Ben. Did I make myself clear with that one? Hayden says, hey Scott, I was just wondering if it is necessary for your child to be immunized to go to preschools. Yeah. And school, yeah. You have a 6 months checkup that you have to go to for the government, a 1 year checkup, and a 3 year checkup. And I think there's also a 6 year checkup too, but my son's not that old yet, so I haven't been to that one. And those make sure he has all his shots, and they make you prove that, and they'll, you know, supply those shots to you totally for free. You're not going to have to pay for any immunization. And if you do have to pay for any kind of shot, it's going to be like crazy cheap. Let's see, Justin is next. Kind of an out of the left field question, but how do you believe Japanese would take a transgender gaijin? I actually had a friend who was a transgender gaijin, surprisingly enough. He did okay pretty much. He was female to male, and you know, he was taking the hormones and everything. He had gone through a lot of hormone treatment. I think I know the school he taught at, he was in the JET program, the school he taught at was very accepting. Obviously he had to let them know about some medical stuff that he had to get taken care of, and it was enough medical stuff that at one point he had to let them know why and how much he had to go, because it was a regular therapy that he had to go to. So they found out, they knew, their views of him didn't change at all. Although I felt like, and I don't know if this actually has to do with the hormone treatment or something like that, but I felt like he personally was more sensitive to any small criticism. And it wasn't, I'm not talking about anything related to his actual being transgender, but like any criticism that he had at all from work at any time. And he eventually left because he just like couldn't handle any type of criticism. He seemed super sensitive. If that has something to do with the hormones, I totally understand. I can see how that would play into that and, you know, get you worked up, because I've seen my wife go through, you know, all different hormonal changes with pregnancy, and there's times she was crazy sensitive about anything. But I could see maybe that would be a problem, like maybe if the hormones do affect you in that way, but I could be totally wrong about that, because obviously, you know, I'm not transgender and I've never gone through hormone therapy for that. But I remember he himself saying that a lot of transgender deal with this, that they feel really worked up from that. And he personally eventually reached a point where he couldn't take a lot of like the criticisms from work and stuff like that due to the fact that he had become so sensitive due to these treatments. Alright, that was a good question though. I mean, very unique, but nonetheless it needed to be answered. James 11 Colors, do you guys know him? I don't know, is he asking a question here? He said, think you'll be able to make it to King Cobra on Saturday? I'll be there all day. Oh, I'm reading this too late, James. Oh, man, James, I'm sorry. If you guys don't know James 11 Colors, you should go check out his videos. Super nice guy. Super hardcore techie dude who actually works for a Japanese company and speaks perfect Japanese. Those of you actually interested in making it in the IT field and learning about actually working for a Japanese company because you can speak perfect Japanese should talk to him. Vincent says, this just recently happened at my work, so I figured I'd ask, does Japan have as big of a problem with people getting hired or promoted due to personal and or family connections rather than having outstanding qualifications? Yes, they do. This seems to be a problem of epic proportions in the US as of late, and I was wondering if it happens often in Japan as well. I wouldn't say that situation happens so much, as one of the bigger problems is people who get promoted due to seniority or due to the time of their longevity of working. And that's kind of idiotic sometimes. Someone who would be way more qualified, has done better at their job, has made more of an impact on whatever kind of service the job offers, still might not get promoted over some idiot who's always been flailing and going crazy at trying to do any little bit of good but has failed miserably just because they have been there a longer time. Now that's slowly starting to change in Japan, just like a lot of social norms are. But I'd say that's more of a bigger problem than, for example, people being related and getting promoted. Nonetheless, that kind of stuff does still happen. For example, like CEOs and things like that are always going to choose their own family to take over their company. They're usually not going to hire an outside person. Oh my gosh, I got a name here I'm probably going to mispronounce. Tur? What do you think, what do you reckon is the view of Japanese public towards the current government with Shinzo Abe? They did well as expected with the elections, but it seems that the percentage of people think that the LDP is actually a good thing and has come down recently to disappointment with Abe's speeches about the future of the economy in Japan. Also, should you have any personal experience of how companies are reacting, if they are reacting in the first place, with monetary easing with their investments and such? A bit of a tricky question, but any view is appreciated. Thanks. Okay. I mean, yeah, that's just a pretty complicated question. For the most part, people I work with and deal with don't really have a lot of views on the government or the control to begin with. Most people I would even ask would say, what's the point of even worrying about it? We have no control over it. Some people are for Abenomics and some people are not. I find the older generations tend to agree with him on a lot of stuff, whereas the younger generation is either apathetic or completely against him. I think where the older generation is not so happy with Abe is his talks about TPP. Some of them really don't want to see that happen. They think Japanese goods are the best goods on earth and that nothing will ever be better than what Japan makes, which I think there are some things Japan does excel at, but I think there are some things that are just pretty much monopolized by price gouging. So I can't personally agree with that. I would like to see a balance of both. At the same time, it does seem like Abenomics are working out pretty well right now, so I can't really complain. You know, I'm making a fair good amount of money. I'm living quite well. You know, I've got a nice house, a nice home. I've got a nice family. We're, you know, great jobs, fed well, clothes on my back. My kids easily go to school for little to no money. They get medical care with no problem. So, I mean, you know, you can only complain so much before you take a comparison look at how other countries have it, and I'd say Japan's doing pretty well. I'm pretty happy with my situation here, to the point that I would never even imagine moving back to America due to the fact that I wouldn't have to want to compete for those prices that people pay for medical alone. But I'm getting into a tangent here. Pretty much like the things I just said. Old people, happy with Abenomics, not happy with TPP. Young people, apathetic or against Abenomics altogether, but for TPP. That breaks it down as simple as possible. I'm sorry, I am messing up your name so bad, and I really apologize. You were the last question. I'm going to go ahead and cut it off here, make it kind of a quick JFAQ. Guys, you're probably wondering, you're like, well, what happened to J News today? This week, like I said, is a little bit messed up. I only have till Wednesday, and even then I'm not sure I'm going to be recording a video because I'll be packing to go ahead and get ready to leave. On top of it, unfortunately, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to make a Osoroshi Saturday because I'm not even going to be here Saturday, and usually I work on that either Friday or Thursday night, and there's no way, unfortunately, for me to get that up via the hotel I'll be staying at because I'll only have an iPad there. I will try my best to make videos that I will upload. Hopefully I can upload them while I'm there, but if not, until next time, I'm Unrested, and this is JFAQ.